I'm Seema Rao, Deputy Director and Chief Experience Officer of the Akron Art Museum, and I'm joined by...
Hi there, I'm Brad. I'm a partner at Studio Muti and representing South African illustration scene.
Cool. So where are you in the world?
We're in Cape Town, which is far away from you guys. And a lot of people have never been to Cape Town, but it's right at the end of Africa, right at the bottom. And it's an interesting place, Cape Town. I think it's a nice mix of people. You know, it's a beautiful city. And I guess we get a lot of inspiration from our town and from the mountains and the ocean.
So I think the one thing that I was looking at a projection map that Americans probably don't understand is how small North America is, our continent, compared to the continent of Africa. Yes. So South Africa is not at all close to Egypt, right? Which would be the opposite of your continent. Yes. Where is South Africa?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the easiest place to find on the African continent because it's the south. So it's the last country at the bottom of the continent. Yeah, so we have a lot of ocean around us. We're kind of, I wouldn't say it's wild out here, but because we're at the bottom of the continent with the ocean surrounding, I guess the weather does lend itself to being quite vibrant, should we say, and the oceans, there's sharks in the ocean, and we have wild animals that might eat you. So that's only if you obviously if you go to their home, but otherwise it's all pretty safe.
That sounds awesome. And you have, so it sort of sounds idyllic, right? Like you have ocean and you have mountains. So what happens in Cape Town? Like, give us a picture of what Cape Town's like.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's idyllic in a way. Look, I'll be honest, the wind does blow. Yeah, it does get into your head a bit. I'm not going to paint a false picture. But, you know, with the mountains jutting out from the sea, that really paints a beautiful picture. So, you know, a lot of film companies come down here to film because there's such diverse locations. You know, you have the winelands, which is 30 minutes away, and to the forest, to the beaches, to the West Coast, which is quite desolate, you know, because of the cold current that goes up there. So there is a lot of variety here. But everyone talks about the mountain, about Table Mountain, and this is our icon, I guess you could call it. It's I think it's one of the natural wonders. And we kind of all live around it. And it feels like, it doesn't, you can call us a city, but it feels like we're small villages around this mountain. Each with its own characteristics, which is kind of nice. So you can you can see a lot of different things in a short space of time.
It feels a little bit like a storybook. Like you have a lot of things going on. I can't quite think of like an American comparison. It's sort of a bit like, I think, Seattle, because Seattle has Mount Rainier, and then it has pretty close the only rainforest in North America in Olympic Park, but it sort of feels, I don't know that we have a cognate. It's certainly very different than Akron, which actually doesn't even have a body of water.
Sure.
So it's you know, we're close to a huge body of water like Erie. Another thing I just we realized the other day when my whole team was talking to your team is that we've sort of spoken, but I wonder, is my accent hard for you to understand?
No, not really.
Because we have thought about how yours is sort of hard for us to understand. Yes. You know, as Americans, we have Canada across the border, and we certainly can tell the difference. And Ohio has an aquatic border with Canada, so it's close. But we sort of sound similar. But one thing I think is really interesting about working with you and hearing what you talk about is that we're separated. We have a common language, and yet we're separate. That there are things that are so different, but there's things that are similar. There's things that you've said in passing that I'm like, what does that mean? And I wonder if part of it is that we are similar and that both of us are colonial nations on some level.
Sure.
Certainly, we're a little bit we became not a colony earlier than you all did, but they're certainly the same thing, right? We're both forces of colonialism and sort of trying to deal with that. You yourself must be a colonial product on some level. Your name is Brad Hotchkiss. For some people who are watching this, might not think Brad Hotchkiss is a person from South Africa. What's your background?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Colonies were a big part of the history of our country. My background my surname is English, but my on my mom's side is Italian.
What was that last name?
Lamberti.
So here in Northeast Ohio, we have a lot of Italians.
Okay,
huge Italian population.
Yeah. Well, I guess, with the colonizing, I mean, obviously everyone went everywhere for a certain period of time, and then settled down, and then you kind of rooted yourself, and then you weren't Italian or English anymore. You were South African or you were American, But because of the trade routes heading through Cape Town, the Dutch, the English, and I guess a bit of Portuguese as well.
Yeah.
Anybody who was exploitative, I'm not sure if that's a word, and wanted to get some land had to go past us in a way. So they kind of set up camp here to an extent.
So I love that idea that it's sort of similar to us, but different, right? So because we are not exactly, we are a trading state because of Lake Erie. So boats would come in from the Atlantic and go down the St. Lawrence Seaway and through the Great Lakes, and then they would go across a canal that connected Lake Erie to the major river system, which was Ohio to the Mississippi. And so they would go over canals through Akron. So in some ways, I think that's one big similarity, that we both have this sort of diversity because of commerce. So, and I think that, the other thing I think that is similar, and we've talked about before, is that there's also a lot of challenges that come with commerce, right? Like there's a lot of economic challenges, but there's also a lot of, racial challenges. Ohio has a lot of segregation, usually by economy. So it's not legal. So it's no longer legally segregated, but certainly there was laws that dictated where people could buy homes and live. And I do think that that's something that when somebody sees South Africa, they can't help but wonder. So in your lifetime, did you live through segregation? Are you of that generation?
When I was young, I was exposed to apartheid, absolutely, but not old enough to understand it. Where I grew up, it was a region that it was a poorer part of the country, and whites were definitely the minority. So I didn't feel any tension around the living circumstances or talking to people in the streets and things like that. But that's probably a naive point of view given my age. Growing up, you obviously start to realize what had happened and how people were treated. And I mean, that's something that we're working on still, I mean, it was such a divided time that there's going to be all sorts of things one has to deal with, and we had a truth and reconciliation committee, and we went through a lot of this process of trying to, talk about it and get it out there. But there's always extremes, and there are always people who are going to push it whichever way they want to. But you're right, like you said, it's more economic now, or structure. We talk about structural racism.
Yeah, that's what we talk about here. Structural racism.
I mean, ours was very structured, obviously, and formalized, and it's just got to be worked on very hard.
I think it's true in the States that we've had a lot of artists talk about structural racism. So even if it's not structural in the political sense, it's certainly structural. And so, for example, one thing that happened here in the 20th century is that they created interstate freeways, and those interstate freeways were built in ways that knocked out by eminent domain. They just took over poor parts of the city to just redline them, and basically that kept Black people in one place and then white people in another, but also made sure that you could get out very quickly. And it's a new one of those just opened in Cleveland recently. So it's something that we're dealing with, and our artists who work in many of the contemporary artists talk to say that the structural racism is part of their art. It's something that they try to think about and deal with. Or some of them say, another artist has said that she doesn't want to deal with the structural racism in her art because she wants to think about someplace else.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point.
So I'm curious if there's a South African artist, if you feel like some of those issues that you dealt with in your country are somehow impact the things you make?
I would say no. And I think just for the reason of that person you mentioned, where they don't want to deal with it. And I think it's all up to the individual. As a studio, I think we don't focus on it intentionally. It is a sensitive subject. We probably, I don't want to say we deal with happier things, but it can get you down, I guess, and also everyone has their own opinion. We're a studio of 13 people. And so we don't come with one ideology, so we don't want to force people to have to think a certain way or do certain things. So in that way, we probably don't focus on it. Yeah.
One of our trustees was saying to me once about a show that was here, it's actually can be brave to focus on joy and beauty. That in the arts sometimes that they ask us to do other things, and it is sort of going against the grain sometimes to do that. So tell us about these groups of 13 people who and who are doing this, going against grain, and also can you let everyone know what Studio Muti means? Sure.
Muti is a medicine, or you'd say a natural remedy made by a Sangoma, which is a Zulu, like a traditional healer, or maybe back in the day you could call them a witch doctor, although I don't know if that's applicable nowadays. But so it's a medicine. It's a traditional medicine, and it's quite a nice word, I guess, because it's quite punchy and it's local, and it means something to us,
So just so that I can clarify, when you say medicine, you mean like herbal remedies, kind of?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, natural remedies. Yeah, absolutely.
So it kind of goes with the joy, right? Your studio gives like natural remedies, right? So tell us about how did you come to be?
The studio started when Clinton Monet left the studio that they were working for, and I guess people grow out of the studios you work for. It's progression, and we met up 2 years later, and the idea was always to start a studio. It was about working with other people and getting other people's ideas. We didn't want to be a studio that had one style, and everyone that worked here had to replicate that style. So trying to find people with new and interesting styles, and their work influences our work. And some people have said they can see, although there are 13 different styles and probably more, people say they can see our style, and sometimes I find that difficult to believe, because we're made up of such different styles. But I think it's possibly, maybe it's the way we portray things, or it's adding humor to certain things, or the way things are crafted. But yeah, I'm not sure.
I could see that. I definitely think the humor.
Yeah.
I would say, having internet stalked your firm a lot, that it's definitely the humor, it's the layering. There's certainly a voice. It feels a little bit like if you're in a restaurant and all the dishes are different, but they have some sort of thing together.
Sure. Yes. Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah. So maybe that's what it is. So how did these people come to you? How did you get 13 after you start with the 2?
Yes. Yeah. It was a slow process. People send their CVs or their portfolios, and we get a lot of portfolios from overseas, and we find, because we want people in the studio and find that it's more beneficial for us to be here together, we'd obviously only entertain the local people, the South Africans, But yeah, if a good portfolio comes our way and somebody who's shown something unique, it's really hard to turn them down, even if at the time maybe we never go out there and say we need help, or sorry, I mean, we're hiring. We've never gone that route, but we've always found our way, and maybe people start to see our work and they want to be part of it. So we just hope that they have enough courage to get hold of us and send their work through, because all the portfolios we see, there might not be a huge amount of work that resonates with us, but if there's a seed of something that you think you can, develop and work with that person, because it's really about developing their style and it's their journey, we can help them. but it's
sounds so
their journey.
collaborative. Is it? You're saying, help them journey together.
Well, in a way, it's collaborative in the fact that we can offer our guidance to an extent, but ultimately it's they're going to have to sit down and do it. Even when I'm doing something, it's going to be my struggle sometimes, and I can get help from people, or they can give opinions, but it might not be the right thing. But yeah, so I would say we give guidance here, whether it's collaborative. I think the individual would still need to, or the illustrator would still need to go on their own journey,
In museum education, they talk about, and actually in education here, a lot of times they talk about certain kinds of teaching methodologies being the guide on the side. So it sounds a little bit like that's what you're doing. So tell us about the process. You're struggling. You have a project. You're struggling with it. So tell us about that process.
Yeah, there's always a difficult part to a project. I think we've worked on so many projects that you can get bored of your own style, or you can get bored of the way you think. You've drawn something 1,000 times the same way, and you just say to yourself, I'm not going to do it again. And I think it's a challenge to try and reinvent yourself a little bit. You might not see it, but I might in my mind go, oh, I've done this differently today. I've changed the format I've worked in. I've experimented, and I think it's the experimentation that gets you over that hurdle of not knowing what to do. It's easy to ask somebody for what you think the answer might be, but it's not often the answer,
It's almost never, I feel like. So, I mean, I admit the time difference makes it so that it's very early in the morning here, and it's later in the afternoon for you there. So maybe I'm just thinking about food, but it makes me think. So my mother is a good cook, and she used to make the same few, different dishes, same thing over and over. And every once in a while, she'd talk to her sister, and then she'd get into her head to try something new. Yeah. And then we'd all be like, it didn't matter how it tasted, it was just different. And that was hard for us. Like, we'd be like, no, I don't think so. And I do think in terms of illustration, how do you allow for yourself to experiment, but keep your voice, or keep it so people are like, oh, that's Studio Muti? Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's firstly the trust of your clients. You work, you experimenting, but it's their job. They're paying you to do this. And I think over the years, we've built trust with our clients that when they send references our way, and luckily it's our work, we're like, cool, we see where your head's at, but we're going to just try something a little bit new. And they might not know that we're going to do that, but it'll still be in the realm. So if we didn't have that trust and that belief that they will buy into most things that we do, then I think it wouldn't be possible. And also, we're not, I don't say we're not too precious, but we've got to play around a bit and try and surprise people, and surprise ourselves. And so, with that in mind, we hope that the client will fall in love with what we do, even if it's a little bit different.
I like the playfulness that is in the process, because the playfulness is also visually so clear, in what is manifest. How do you foster playfulness in the visual?
Yeah, I think that's an individual thing as well. We spoke about it last time, is that there's a bit of, humor is a big part of our culture, and I think as a studio, we get on quite well, and there is humor in our interactions and joking around. And I think that lends itself to playfulness in illustrations. And also in the atmosphere in the studio, it's not a heavy place, it's a colorful, bright place, and there's music playing, and we understand that creativity, it just doesn't happen on time all the time. So we obviously try and give people space to experiment. And I think it's that space. We do, if we're not on a job, we encourage people to play around and just try something new. There's no pressure. And then from that, you can take it into maybe a client job,
Yeah. I love, so the sound, all the work, the client, all this is playful. Do you all think about the viewer and their sense of play when you're working?
Me personally, I don't. Other people might, I guess the worry about thinking what the viewer will think is you start thinking about them too much, you know, and that kind of starts getting in your head a bit. You kind of psych yourself out, you know. So it's to focus on what you think is the right way to do it, or what you think is playful. I guess it's your personality coming through. That's what's showing. Yeah.
It's interesting that it's come up often. Many of the people who we've interviewed have said the same thing.
Yes.
They don't.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean that makes sense. So we're almost out of time. We'd like to end these conversations with something positive. So do you have something you're looking forward to, or something you want to share with us?
Well, I think you know, for us being so far away from your audience and whoever might see this, I think one thing I'd like to put out there is that illustration is difficult, and there are a lot of people out there doing a lot of good work. But you know, if you can make it from a little place in Africa right at the bottom and get lots of people to see your work, I really want to encourage them to kind of take that motivation into whatever they're doing, because I think it's quite scary to put yourself out there and put your work out there. But I would encourage them to do it.
You know, my colleague Gina says one of the best things that ever happened to us is that we got to look for artists on Instagram, and we are constantly stalking people on Instagram looking for them. And it is pretty amazing what you found. We found you all on Instagram. So we're going to link to your Instagram account from this video so people can go find you. Thank you very much.
That'd be great. Cool. Thanks, Emma.